Shannon, you're the MP for Lakeland. Tell me a little bit about your riding.
Well, it expands across a vast area of northeast Alberta, east of Edmonton all the way to the Saskatchewan border. Lots of heavy oil and conventional oil and gas development just south of the oil sands, of course. And the main economic drivers throughout all the communities in Lakeland are agriculture and energy development. So I've been really grateful to be able to be active on both of those issues since being elected in October.
So you are in a sacrifice riding for both Justin Trudeau and Rachel Notley. Agriculture and oil and gas, that's sort of the sacrifice community for their ideological extremism.
Yeah, I think that's an astute way of putting it. You can tell that agriculture in rural Canada isn't on their radar at all. And then, of course...
Except for to unionize it on the Rachel Notley side.
Yes, that's right, yeah. And undermine their ability to make decisions about their own land and their own work, in which they're experts. And in the case of energy, it's very challenging times in Lakeland as it is throughout Alberta, which has domino impacts for the whole country. And it is very troubling to see the doubling down of bad policy at both levels of government that are hitting the sector at the very worst time in the hardest ways possible.
I want to ask you another question. How about the wildfires? Is that reached into your riding or is it for the north?
Well, my riding is stretches along the southern border of the Fort McMurray, Cold Lake, Laklabish riding, and so Lakeland is the front line of supporting our neighbors in the north, and it has been incredible to see the way that villages and hamlets and small towns and farmers and Hutterites and First Nations have banded together right across the constituency to support their northern neighbors with overwhelming generosity and compassion and love and free fuel and food and accommodations. It's been just incredible, but we're looking forward to the federal government finally actually asking the question about what they will, answering the question about what they will do to support energy sector workers and how they're going to address the job losses, not only because of the last year, but also caused by the fire.
I think Fort McMurray should change its name legally to Bombardierville. And maybe it'll get a grant. I'm only half joking. Shannon, I remember when you and I met 15, 20 years ago. It was the Reform Party, the Canadian Alliance, and the Liberals were in power back then. For much of that time, Jean Chrétien was the Prime Minister, another Quebec Liberal, big taxes, things like that. But let me say this, and let me give him some credit. Although he signed the Kyoto Protocol, he never did anything about it other than sign it. Under Jean Chrétien, carbon emissions went up. And in fact, the one Liberal cabinet minister from Alberta back then, Anne McClellan, although she was, yes, a Liberal, she was a pro-oil sands Liberal and worked to put the regulatory framework in place that allowed the oil sands to boom. So I know this sounds very odd coming from me, a right-wing, anti-liberal, conservative guy who my whole life, but I must give credit, if I'm going to be honest. Jean Chrétien did not destroy the oil patch. He allowed Anne McClellan to help midwife the oil patch. They restrained the environmental part of their cabinet, the Sheila Copses, who wanted to strangle it. Compare that to Justin Trudeau now, if you would.
Well, I appreciate you saying that. The most worrying thing is the radical elements of this current federal Liberal government, and I'm worried that they are dominating the agenda and going to drive their final decisions. The federal Liberals are trying to pretend that the struggles in the energy sector are just related to low oil prices and a lack of access to export markets, but they in fact deliberately and constantly undermine confidence in Canada's regulatory system, in our monitoring and in our enforcement, and in our industry overall. They deter investment by these interim measures that they're making, by continuing to add redundant or new hurdles into the regulatory process. They fail to counter both domestic and international mischaracterizations of our world.
Fail to counter it. They're the ones making those characterizations.
They go out on the world stage and to other provinces and reinforce this false characterization of our track record of energy development, which in fact is world leading, environmentally responsible, the most socially and economically responsible energy development in the world. Canada and Alberta in particular are second to none on the planet for sustainable, responsible energy development. And that's what our federal representatives and our provincial representative in Alberta, by the way, should be saying every day unapologetically all over Canada and on the world stage.
I don't like Jean Chrétien. There's many things I dislike about him. Foreign policy is a major issue. But when it came to the domestic scene, I think he was a grown-up. And by that I mean he didn't like conflict for its own sake. Yes, he had his biases, but again, when I look at his approach to the oil sands and Alberta, he obviously wasn't pro-Alberta, and the feeling was mutual, but he wasn't a saboteur. He wasn't an underminer. And I would say he was a grown-up. And I look at Justin Trudeau, and it's very clear that he's not the grown-up in his own government. And so I'm worried that there is no grown-up. Gerald Butts is an ideological radical. You're an MP. You're in Ottawa. You follow things from a different place than I do. Is there anyone within the power structure near the center of this new Liberal government who would act like a brake pedal as opposed to the accelerator pedal on this war on the oil patch? Is there anyone saying, slow down, boss, you're going to destroy tens of thousands of hundreds of thousands of jobs, billions of dollars, you're going to wreck? Is there anyone saying, where's the sober voice of reason? Is there one, or is it the radicals in charge?
Well, I wonder the same thing, because you'll recall probably about a month ago, the Environment Minister, remember, hosted a reception with a number of anti-energy lobby groups who said we must reject Energy East and who want to ultimately shut down the oil sands. She also shared an article on Twitter that said the Paris scheme may come into effect years earlier than expected, which would be, and this was the quote in the article, a rude shock to the fossil fuel industry. And then the quote said, which should be a cause for considerable excitement. So that gives you a sense of one of the most lauded and celebrated ministers that Justin Trudeau likes to vaunt and support. I think that revealed her real perspective and her agenda, and I think that is driving the Liberal federal government's policies.
And I note that the energy minister, utterly marginalized, wasn't, for example, was not
Washington, right?
Yeah.
Didn't go.
Whereas the environment minister's chief of staff is a former senior executive with a radical foreign-funded environmental group. You have not given me any information that has dulled my thesis that extremist ideologues are running the Prime Minister's office and running the government, and they will not be centrist, moderate managers like Jean Chrétien. They are destroyers. And I'm very sorry for the people of Lakeland and all of Alberta and British Columbia that will become sacrifice communities. Last word to you, Shannon.
Well, I also worry about the future of Canada, because the fact is that Alberta and Albertans and people from all across Canada and all over the world who have moved there to build my province and to work in the energy sector that provides countless benefits to every person in every community across Canada, including public services and programs that people in all of those other provinces value, are going to be very damaged by the policy agenda of this government. And so it's not just a problem in Lakeland or a tremendous struggle for Alberta. It is something that will ultimately damage our entire country, and it will drive division and alienation right across Canada.
I'm sorry to agree with you, but I do. Nice to talk to you, Shannon.
Thanks, Ezra.
Thanks for watching. Click here to never miss a Rebel update. Want even more of the Rebel? Well, click here to become a premium member.